Hey, what's going on? Ben and Arden here for At the Letters, brought to you by the all-new 2019 Ford Ranger. Audio podcast this week with Blue Jays pitching coach Pete Walker. Get that wherever you get your podcasts. We've come into the studio to talk about the Toronto Blue Jays, who are still playing games, believe it or not. About 15 to go, running out the string, trying to avoid 100 losses. Last time out, we talked about TJ Zeuch making his Major League debut. This time out, we talk about Anthony Kay making his Major League debut. Half the return for Marcus Stroman. Lefty, 94-95. Nice big sweeping breaking ball. You can do worse.
You could do a lot worse. Yeah, I thought that was a really strong debut. I mean,
we have seen worse quite often this year.
Yeah, we have seen a lot of worse outings than what Anthony Kay offered. I mean, you look at like you said, that sweeping curveball. He calls it curveball. It kind of looks like a slider.
Slurvy, right?
Yeah, very slurvy pitch, and he's got changeup along with that, and a fastball that he was really locating at the very top of the zone, getting those swings and misses, and in on right-handed hitters. So the Blue Jays loved what they saw from him, and understandably so. I mean, that was a really good outing from a pitcher who as recently as a couple months ago was in Double-A. So, I mean, you look back to the beginning of June, he was, pitching in the Eastern League, going to Birmingham or Albany or whatever it is, and facing Double-A hitters. And now he's going against a playoff team in the Tampa Bay Rays. His next start coming against the Yankees, another challenge for him. But he's doing well, holding his own, and that's got to be really encouraging for the Jays.
And I'm by no means suggesting that he's going to be, leading the American League in ERA or anything like that. But when you see a guy make his big league debut and he's striking guys out, and he's got some velocity, I mean, that's what you want to see. You saw TJ Zeuch making his debut, and obviously he does things differently. Sinker baller, and he's pitching to contact. But, I mean, in today's game, it's hard to survive without velocity, without whiffs, without swing and miss. Anthony Kay showed us that, and he showed us a command of the strike zone that we also haven't really seen a lot from Blue Jays pitchers. Blue Jays pitchers walk a lot of batters. Anthony Kay was able to find the corners of the strike zone and attack.
Yeah, especially early. He did a great job with that. And this is someone who, in the course of his minor league career, has walked a lot of guys. And even this season, that was one of the problems for him when he was pitching at AAA Buffalo for the Jays. The walks were uncomfortably high. And so to see him come out, and especially early on when he had a bit better command, just fire everything within the strike zone, that was really encouraging. Later, you saw signs of the command fading, hits a guy in 0-2, walks in a run, walks the last two batters he faces. Yeah. So, it wasn't a perfect outing, but let's be realistic here about what Anthony Kay is. This is not the 1-1 pick in the draft. This is someone that the Blue Jays view as a potential mid-rotation starter, someone who, I threw a Robbie Ray suggestion, like, could this guy be Robbie Ray? And someone I asked said, yeah, that's a realistic potential outcome for Anthony Kay. And that's pretty good. I mean, that's a good big league pitcher.
It's funny when you talk to people in the game about like what their kind of high upside projections for guys would be, and they're like, Wade Miley, like I think a lot of fans, and even like we fall prey to this too. Like sometimes, like, could he be, Sale or like, pick your good pitcher. Yeah. But like within the game, like the expectations are so much more reasonable. Yeah. And like disappointing, I think, to fans if they actually heard them.
Yeah. I think you're right, and yet at the same time, those pitchers, like Wade Miley, is pretty good. Like he's a big league pitcher, and that's the thing. Is sometimes you trade for pitchers, and not to pick on Thomas Pannone, but the Jays traded for him a couple years ago for Joe Smith, and you look at where he is now. He's got an ERA in the 6s, and it's not clear that his future is as a big league starter. So if you actually get a big leaguer and someone who can stick in the rotation, in the bullpen, that's a success for you.
You mentioned Kay kind of petering out at the end of his outing, and I think that's one of the hardest things for a lot of these pitchers is managing their energy reserves over an outing and maintaining their velocity and not, when I pull up their baseball savant, like during the game, seeing the velocity line going like this and then going down, like, innings 4 and 5. And we've seen that, even Aaron Sanchez was struggling with that at times this year. And clearly it looks like he wasn't quite healthy when he was pitching for the Blue Jays, obviously, because he's having surgery. But that's a guy who's been in the big leagues for a long time. And, you would think, like, with the amount of starts that he's had, would be better at, just managing his energy throughout a whole outing. But I think it really is such a challenge for players, for pitchers, and it's probably a really hard thing to work on without actually just being in games and experiencing it, and experiencing kind of the adrenaline at the major league level and the energy and the environment, and how much different your conviction and intent has to be with how you're pitching.
Yeah, and that's something that Kay says that he's actually gotten better at in the last year, because in 2018, that was his first season back from Tommy John. So he wasn't fully back to that full conviction where he is delivering everything with the intent of max effort. Let's get a swing and miss here. Let's go all out. Now he says that he feels more comfortable really going max effort, and you can see that in the results, and the Jays are definitely encouraged.
So that's the good with the Blue Jays, and that's about all the good that there is, because the Blue Jays have now lost 90 times, and they might lose 100 times. Yeah. They have just kind of, last podcast we talked about, wow, like they've been losing a lot, and they've just kind of continued losing. They take 2 or 3 against the Red Sox, which is nice, but you look at that Red Sox dugout, and that's not a real motivated bunch. That's not a team that's really, believing that it's going to make the playoffs right now. When the Blue Jays come up against the Tampa Bay Rays and the New York Yankees, you can just see how overmatched they are right now. Being around the team, do you sense any kind of dispiritness, whatever the word is?
A lack of spirit.
Yeah, a lack of spirit, or do you sense that all this losing is having an impact?
With the Jays?
Yeah.
No, honestly, it's funny you mentioned the Red Sox. Like, I sense that more with the Red Sox than with the Jays. Just, watching, like you said, the dugout. And, of course, firing Dave Dombrowski, a move that probably not exactly thrilling news to the Toronto Blue Jays as they contemplate whatever new executive is going to come in there and kind of reshape things for Boston. But to answer your question, with the Blue Jays, I don't think so. I mean, unfortunately, they're kind of used to losing in a sense, where this has been the case all season long. They've had a tough season all year. It's not like they burst out of the gate and they built up this huge lead way over 500, and now they're kind of like falling off. This has kind of been the norm for them. So I think that if this were to continue next year, then there would be a lot of disgruntled people, and no one's happy to be losing, but I don't sense that it's like totally disgruntled in there.
The part that's tough is, like, if the Blue Jays were losing like 2-1 in like these really like tightly contested ball games, and they were right there, and it's like, oh, okay, they just don't have quite enough to get them over the hump. But when balls are dropping in the outfield, when you're seeing misplays and you're seeing balls being fired around the diamond and errors, and like you look at it's you don't want to overreact to one bad game, a midweek game, 2 teams that aren't going to make the playoffs in September. But the Blue Jays in their series finale against the Boston Red Sox misplayed a bunch of balls in the outfield, and I think that's the part that is dispiriting, and that's the part that's like, no, this is hard to watch.
Without a doubt, I think that's a good point. And when you look at Derek Fisher, Billy McKinney, those kinds of mistakes that happen in the outfield, they're pretty glaring.
Yeah.
When a pitcher makes a mistake and he yanks a slider and it goes into the dirt, or he leaves a fastball middle and Mookie Betts hammers it over the wall, well, it's a mistake, but it's less obvious in a way, at least to the casual observer. But everyone, I mean, you don't even have to be a baseball fan to see Derek Fisher go up for those balls and goes past him. I mean, it's glaringly obvious that those are mistakes.
So what's going on with Derek Fisher here? Like, I bandied about this idea on Good Show, which is where all good ideas begin, on Good Show.
Right.
He looks like a guy who, like, he's clearly athletic, right? Like, he's great build, and he's super fast, and obviously generates a ton of power with his swing. But sometimes, like, he looks like a guy like who is making the transition from another sport. Like, it looks like it's, he played like safety in the SEC for like a bunch of years, and through the NCAA, he was like, oh yeah, I'm probably not going to cut it in the NFL. Now I'm 22, 23, I'm going to transition to baseball. So some of these reads are a little foreign for me, and I'm not quite sure when to attack a ball in the outfield or when to lay off. But no, the guy's been playing baseball for a very, very long time, and we're still seeing just kind of a lack of feel for some plays in the outfield that big leaguers have to make.
Exactly. I mean, left field too. We think of that as the easiest outfield position. Maybe the easiest position on the entire field, depending on what you think of first base, right? So you have to be able to handle that. And I know it's the major leagues. These balls are coming off the bat hard. Yeah. There is spin on them. They're diving. You have to read angles, and in certain parks you have to read tough bounces. not saying it's easy, but no one's expecting the major leagues to be a free ride. No one's saying that this should be easy. It's really hard. That's why only 750 guys get to do it at a time, except for September. So it's, for Fisher, he has to be able to make those plays. And it's not to pile on him for the errors of that one finale, because that's in the past now. And, there's no point in dwelling on it, but he has to be able to make those plays going forward. And if the Blue Jays want to compete, as they say they do, then they need to find guys who have a little bit more polish, and they need to prioritize that for the sake of their pitchers too and the overall team, because if they are even remotely competitive next year and you have plays like that happening, that will hurt morale.
Well, and that's just the thing. Like, you don't want to overreact to one bad game. But also, like, this is something that we've seen from Derek Fisher. Like, I think it's been more consistent than just one bad game. You even look offensively since he's come over to the Blue Jays now, 30 games, 87 plate appearances, not the biggest sample in the world. Admittedly, it's a 75 weighted runs created plus. Offensively, he hasn't been stellar. Defensively, he hasn't been good. And the Blue Jays are in a position where he's out of options next year. They paid a price to acquire him, Aaron Sanchez, Joe Biagini, and Cal Stevenson. So optically, if you just cast him loose this offseason, it doesn't look great.
Right.
I think Derek Fisher's back with this team next year. And I think the Blue Jays will say, well, we're going to give him an offseason to reset and get away from the game for a little bit. Look, he was traded, and when he was with Houston, he wasn't sure if he was a big leaguer or a minor league, whatever. And they're going to say, we'll give him a fresh start in spring. But I think the leash on him next year probably has to be pretty short.
I agree with all of that. I think that when you look at him, it has been a tough year, as I understand it, when you think about being traded and some of the things that come with that. And so having the chance to refresh will be good for him. I don't think he arrives in spring with a particularly long leash, nor should he, based on the performance that we've seen. And it's interesting. You look at that trade as a whole, and suddenly what the Jays gave up. I mean, Cal Stevenson, my understanding was he was never really viewed as a prospect. So, all right, let's go with that for the one prospect. Biagini is getting lit up. He was sent to the minors. So you're not necessarily worried about Joe Biagini making this trade look bad for the Jays. And Sanchez looks like a non-tender candidate after having season-ending surgery. So when you look at what the Jays gave up, there's nothing there that you're like, oh man, I can't believe they gave that up. But also when you look at what they got back, it's not like there's anything where you're like, oh, that's really good or even kind of good. So far, Derek Fisher was a disappointment, and so far Sanchez and Biagini are a disappointment too.
It's one of those trades where nobody wins.
Oh yeah,
particularly the game of baseball.
Right.
The problem the Blue Jays are facing right now is they're kind of testing out all these outfielders, right? Fisher, Grichuk, Hernandez, McKinney, Alford, Davis. You got a lot of guys who, on a good team, could be maybe even better than a fourth outfielder. They're your guy who plays left and hits 8th or 9th in your order, right? And maybe hits you 25 bombs. And he strikes out a lot and doesn't get on base at a high clip, but he's at the bottom of your order, so he's not coming up that often. The Blue Jays have 7 of those guys, and they are waiting for somebody to show that, hey, I can be more. They're looking for what Randall Grichuk did over the final 4 months of 2018, where he lit the world on fire and played really, really well. And coming into this year, people like you and I were Randall Grichuk's going to build on that and have a good year. Well, it didn't happen, and nobody is really seizing this opportunity right now when they're receiving it. And the playing time's inconsistent, and guys are in and out of the lineup, which is what's going to happen when you have 7 of those guys around that you're trying to get reps for consistently. But there's an opportunity here, and nobody's seizing it. And what that means for the Blue Jays going forward is that their outfield is not good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you look at defensively, which is kind of the glaring spot right now, and you can extend that offensively too, where you've got too many guys who just have an OBP under 300 and aren't doing enough. The one guy who did seize that opportunity for a while was Lourdes Gurriel Jr.
Right.
We'll see, if he's back, which could be back pretty soon to finish strong potentially. Yeah. But that's it. Otherwise, you haven't seen a lot of guys really take it. Teoscar did for a little bit, but not long enough. And as a result, you have a collection of outfielders who collectively have fallen short of their potential.
Yeah, and I don't even lump Gurriel in with those
Yeah.
guys, right? And although like his performance, as good as it was brief, right? And we've seen times in his, not to the rain on the parade, like we've seen times in his major league career where he hasn't looked great.
Right.
Everybody who listens to this podcast knows I'm a big believer of Lourdes Gurriel Jr.
Right.
My credentials, you can check them, but like it's not like a thing that we've seen over a full season or over 2 seasons. I just think there's like so much uncertainty in this outfield. And if the Blue Jays are going to go to a contending team, like one of the best teams in the American League, if they're going to win the AL East and beat the Yankees and beat the Rays, they're going to need some, unless some of these players take very serious steps forward, they're going to need some really premium additions to their outfield.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they're going to need depth behind them too, because even you look at the Yankees and they have guys step in when a Stanton goes down. I mean, you have to have that kind of depth and have Frazier in the minors who can come up for you. So the Jays aren't close to that point right now, and a lot of work ahead for them.
The other spot that you could see the Blue Jays need some reinforcements for next year is first base. I'm sure Rowdy Tellez would beg to differ. Has Rowdy Tellez done enough in September that you would feel good rostering him as your everyday first baseman and not supplementing at that position next year? Or do you think the Blue Jays should still go bring in a veteran bat and Tellez starts at AAA?
I think they should at least bring in someone to compete, because you look at the season-long production from Tellez, and last I checked, his OPS is around 725, 730. So that's, I mean, for the league as a whole, that's not great.
Yeah.
And then for first base, where the expectation is that you're going to have an 800 OPS, that's the league-wide OPS for first baseman is 802. So Tellez is falling short of that, and they need to see more from him. That being said, give him credit. I mean, he's got 4 home runs in his last 9 games, so that's a really good sign for the Blue Jays to see that power coming through. And if he can continue to build on that, then maybe he solidifies his spot on this team, because, there's still 2 weeks left. That's still, close to 10% of the season. So it's not nothing, but I just think that Tellez, so far, you look at the OBP, you look at the low walk rate, even the power is not overwhelming, right? Like you see Freddie Galvis and Kevin Pillar have 20-plus homers.
Yeah.
So 19 from Tellez, I'm like, all right, that's fine, but it's not really impressive.
20 homers ain't what it used to be.
Exactly.
There's going to be like 100 dudes, probably more, that hit 20 homers this year. So you can, that's going to be out there on the free agent market. Like that's going to be available cheaply in trades. I think that if you started Rowdy Tellez every day at first base for an entire season, he could probably hit 30.
Sure.
But I think he could probably also have an OBP at like 280, 290.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. He needs to walk more. And we're not seeing those improvements in plate discipline that he needs to be making in order to have that power profile look better in today's game.
Right. If you look at like Daniel Vogelbach or Kyle Schwarber, these guys, similarly not going to add a ton of value with their defense, and they have power and left-handed bats, but they're walking more. So that's going to help their on-base percentage and help their overall production.
I was just looking at that. Vogelbach, 344 OBP.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to combine the power with the walks. So you can strike out a lot in today's game.
Sure.
That's fine. Everybody's striking out a ton.
Yeah.
You can just sell out for power in today's game. That's fine. Everybody's hitting a ton of home runs, and look, the ball's juiced, and you get the ball in the air. A lot of times it goes over the fence. Great. Get your home runs. But you also got to walk, and you also have to show some plate discipline and an approach. And look, younger guys in this league like Rowdy Tellez, they don't get any breaks from umpires. Like umpires aren't doing them any favors. And there's a number of Rowdy Tellez at bats that I've watched recently where I'm like, yeah. I mean, some guys probably get a ball on that call, right? And it's a strike to Rowdy Tellez, but it's kind of part of it. Maybe this is like the old school analyst thing. Maybe you cut down your swing, right? And try to make a bit more contact. Like I don't know what the adjustment is, but there needs to be one.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not easy, right, to lay off those pitches. We see them every night. I mean, those pitches are so good.
Yeah.
Major League pitching is incredible, and we talked a little bit about that with Pete Walker on the audio version of this podcast this week. It's insanely hard to hit those guys, but the best hitters in the world do it. And if Rowdy Tellez wants to graduate to that level, then that's going to be something he has to do.
That's the thing, right? Baseball's really hard. Like hitting's really, really hard. Like it might be one of the hardest singular skills across professional sports is hitting major league pitching. But you got to hit major league pitching if you're going to win a World Series.
Right? Someone has to.
So if this collection of Blue Jays is not going to be able to hit major league pitching, even at a consistent rate, right? Like, think of the guy like Rowdy Tellez. Like, he has these hot streaks, right? Like, what a September hitter he is. You know, last September, terrific. This September, terrific. But then the valleys in, June or May are so deep.
Yeah.
Same thing with Teoscar Hernandez. He'll light the world on fire for a month, and then for 6 weeks he'll go into this deep, deep valley. And at the end, like, the numbers look all right, but if you have a team full of guys that are not consistent and that are going through those valleys together, like, you could lose a lot of games, and obviously you need to be winning a lot more than you are losing in order to reach the MLB postseason. I just don't know that you can build a contender with guys who are this inconsistent.
Yeah, well, to me, it's a question of the overall balance of it, right? I mean, I don't need metronomic production from guys. If someone wants to go through crazy hot streaks and crazy cold streaks, that's fine if the overall balance takes you to a 820 OPS, let's say. But the Jays just aren't getting that from enough guys.
But I guess if you had a team full of guys who are going through those tremendous peaks and valleys, like, is that going to have too much of a negative impact on your ability to win enough games?
I think if they all had 820 OPSs, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
I think. But I have yet to see that team, so we don't know.
The Blue Jays are testing it.
Yeah.
They're trying to find out. 2 weeks to go for the Toronto Blue Jays, playing some playoff teams. Anything in particular you're looking for over these final couple weeks that you're interested in seeing?
I think the pitchers, Kay, Zoik, guys like that, see how they finish. Trent Thornton even, strong start against the Red Sox, or strong appearance against the Red Sox, wasn't a start. So see how they finish, and that'll set the Jays up as they enter their offseason.
Elvis Luciano. That's the one thing I'm interested in seeing. That's just what he looks like.
Well, you better watch carefully because I don't think he's going to pitch very often.
You better keep your head up because the ball might hit you
Yeah.
in the press box
Yeah.
'cause when he's all over the place. But kind of an interesting play that the Blue Jays made there in basically stealing a prospect from the Kansas City Royals.
We'll see if it works out.
We will. That's Ben Nicholson-Smith. I'm Arden Zwelling. You can listen to our interview with Pete Walker on the audio version of the podcast. Get that wherever your fine podcasts are sold. Talk to you next time on At The Letters.